So, howdy, hi, happy Thursday, everyone. Bonnie and Greg Dixon here for Living the Life You Love. And we're with Jerry Smith here. And I'm just going to say we have a lot of history. Bonnie has a lot of history with Jerry. They've known each other for over, 30 years maybe?
Probably so.
In the natural health business.
I just was born yesterday, so I
You
don't
were
see
just
how
born
that's
yesterday.
possible.
Well, he's the first time we've ever seen him with a beard, so that's completely new to us. And we did a number of projects together related to stories and biography. And one of the ones was we we had a thing called Tell Your Story Productions, where we did family stories, personal stories. In theory, we did business stories, but we never got around to doing any business stories. Um, and Jerry had we Bonnie and I have been doing interviews with people for a long time, and Jerry's been doing personal biographies for a long time. So that was one project we did, and then going back to the natural health stuff here. Let's see here. Let's find. So we also did this thing called the natural health movement, and we spent some time. Bonnie and I spent some time traveling up and down the I-5 corridor, interviewing pioneers of the natural health. We also had people. We invited people as guests on broadcasts like this for people in the movement. Yeah.
Jerry was able to interview some amazing people. So the website's still up, and it's worthwhile to go to just to hear some of the interviews of the pioneers
and the pioneers
of the natural products industry. It's quite fascinating. Why did anybody, start a company or a university or whatever? And I want to back way up when Jerry and I first met out in the field in the Oregon, Washington area. And what's interesting when you meet someone and you just really connect. And he and I, over the many years in the natural products industry, I would always support his amazing drive to do exactly of sharing people's stories and gathering history. And because as we all know, as we're aging older, some of the people we knew are gone now, and he was really terrific at gathering these stories, and we learned from him. And I always appreciated that about Jerry. I believe, Jerry, can you share? You actually were inspired to tell your father's story. I believe was the original, thing that you did. Is that? Did I get that right?
Yes, although I haven't published a lot what I've done, so the plumber's sink always leaks, right? But yes, I did audio. I started off audio recording because that's a relatively inexpensive way, and you know what? My advice to anybody who is thinking about that and maybe intimidated by the technology, if you have a smartphone, you can get an app and make a fine recording.
Yeah,
and you can, and of course, what I realized is I could write this story, but there's a lot of personality that's missing when you don't have an audio and a visual or an audio visual. So my father told me stories that he would probably never tell me face to face. I learned a lot about it. My father and mother divorced early. My father was a train wreck, and he got out of the train wreck and rebuilt his life and became an alcohol counselor. And that's when I kind of reunited with a relationship with him. And what is this? The most memorable thing he said, and this was an audio. I did video later, but I actually kind of forgot some of the really cool things he did without a camera looking down to the barrel. So as much as I like video, he told me, God made me strong because he knew how much trouble I was going to get into.
Wow. That's powerful.
And
powerful statement.
He's right. He did, but he got out of it. That's the happy part of it. And so that if you want me to go on from there, or
yes,
another question, I thought, well, you could do video, and I had a camera, but would it be good enough? And so I experimented. During some time, they lived in him and his new family. They lived in next door in Idaho. and kind of a little bit out in the country. So it wasn't too easy to visit him. But one time on a long holiday, I brought this really amateur setup, and it took hours to set it up. And, it was kind of, I realized that was like too much setup and not enough talk. So I found that a lot of times just doing audio worked. And I did a long session before he got seriously ill. I did a long session that was really quite candid and special. So I learned some of the technical items and started acquiring some equipment and then what impressed me was Dr. Michael Murray. I worked with Michael Murray at a vitamin company. Michael Murray is a naturopathic physician, but he did some practice, but mostly he did research and research development, and has written many books, and was educated at Bastyr University in Seattle. But I worked with him, and I actually orchestrated videos that he did. So I kind of got my initiation into the process. And so as a result of that, he told stories about his being a young doctor, and I realized that that was should be saved and recorded. So I wound up, when I asked him, "Hey, I'd like to tell your story," because I was in the natural product industry, and I know that a lot of people were getting older, and I wanted to get his interview. We said, "Well, talk to the professor. Yeah, he's the one you should do." And we did a great interview with him, and then they got more credibility, and we wound up, I should say because I was pretty much a one-man band, interviewing a lot of people initially, and that led to other opportunities to catch people's stories. And some of them were, there's a variety of things. They're not all physicians. Some of them were retailers. In fact, Bonnie knew a lot of good retailers, and we've gotten several of their stories, one of which she alluded to that died maybe a year after we got an update from him on how he got into owning a health food store. He never intended to do that. So because of the context that Bonnie had and myself mutually, we organized and finished quite a few interviews. And in fact, I'll just say we were on the brink of a real breakthrough with a major trade show organization, and we had negotiated interest, and they wanted us to show up at in Southern California at a large, like 100,000 attendees.
I think we can name it Natural Products Expo West.
Absolutely. I didn't want to get too much detail, but yes. So we were literally, the day they were down in Southern California with family, and we were all prepped to do like impromptu interviews of old timers. And I was about to get on the plane, and the COVID shutdown hit.
Yeah. And we were at the Anaheim RV park.
That's right.
It was 48 hours before the event.
Yeah.
And we were so excited, and everything shut down. But what's amazing is, Jerry, you continued the journey to interviewing. We even interviewed an amazing herbalist, Michael, on Michael?
Well, we had a couple.
Yeah.
Tiara.
On the
way home. Canada said we needed to make our way home.
Yeah, and we did.
Stopped there. And his wife, Heather.
Michael is probably 85 now, and I'm so glad we did that interview.
And, two of the people we interviewed are no longer with us.
Yeah. At
least two that we know of.
Right.
And one person who was on our list passed away shortly before we could get a hold of him. So it just underscores the importance of getting these stories while people still around and still can tell them.
Right. My father's now 94 and a half. And over the many years, Jerry helped me, do some interviews with my father. And even now, it's great fun. He's still able to do Zooms, and he's still able to it's funny, I FaceTime him and I always take his picture and I listen to his stories because I will not remember all those stories. He remembers so many things from when he was young.
Right.
Maybe not what he had for breakfast, but he remembers what happened, 75 years ago.
Yeah. And, going back to what you said, you don't need fancy technology. If you're talking to somebody, one of our best story productions was the person didn't want to be on camera. So we just bought a smartphone with a microphone, but even the newer phones have pretty good microphones. You put it on a pillow, put it somewhere, and that, you can just, and it's not, people don't even notice it. And there's so many tools now. You can transcribe it, do all sorts of stuff that, would have saved, hundreds of hours of work.
I'm glad you mentioned that.
Probably
there's something new that a lot of people can take advantage of with very little preparation. In fact, a lot of times that's what happens. And I just wanted to show you one of the latest updates on iPhone, and lots of iPhone, not new iPhone, the software I'm talking about. And when you call somebody, let me try to call somebody who's not going to answer. But when you call somebody,
you can call me, I won't answer.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't have it on my speed dial right now. So let's see. Okay. Yeah. Let's try. I know. So when you call on it, there's a little image here. If you tap on it, it says, "This call will be recorded. Audio prompt will start." And you start recording the conversation. I'm not sure who's going to answer that because I think it was a robocall. The point is, it transcribes it and records the audio automatically on a note. This is the drop dead easiest way to get grandpa's stories. And then you can edit them together or get somebody to help you. That is an excellent example of get the story. It's like, not to be preachy to people who have older relatives, but you can be a journalist for the family.
Yeah.
And beautiful journalist.
Things like this make it. Otherwise, how do we ever do this? Nobody was going to know if you don't talk to the old time.
No, for sure. And before Christmas, I just suggested if they're going to spend time with your family, just take photos. Take some video with your phone. Maybe just record the audio. I had many times when I just wish I had something recorded all the time. So
right. You can edit it out.
Originally, did Jerry? You took pictures and you did recordings, and you would have the recording going, but showing different still pictures. That is what happened with the gent we did. He was not interested in being on camera.
Yeah.
But luckily, his daughter saved photos that he was going to chuck out.
Yeah.
And she saved them and gave them to us. And then he did the audio, and Greg put it together. And then all this in a mad panic.
I was planning to do a video slide presentation and maybe a little website. And she phoned on a Monday and said, "Oh, it's his birthday on Friday, and I want to give him a book." A book. Oh, so anyway, so I put it together and I come up with a draft, and then she fiddled with it and printed it. Now I'm geared up. I could easily do that. If somebody said I wanted a book tomorrow, I can have a book for them tomorrow because I have that. I'm set up to do it.
Repurposing that is, if someone's having a big birthday party. We had a friend do a big birthday party, and she specifically wanted us there to document it with pictures.
Yeah.
And then a year later, and she knew she was ill, but a year later, all of that was repurposed for her memorial. And it was her husband contacted us and said, unfortunately, she had passed. Yeah. And would we create? It was like a video reel.
Yeah. So it was a similar thing. We added different things and gave it a slightly different spin, but it was, a lot of it. But she knew she was dying, so that's why she had us do the birthday and gave me her photo album, so I scanned it. But I don't know how many. I've done dozens of those things. I've ended up being Dr. Death, right? Sometimes I didn't even know people. Just people gave me the photos and put together the presentations.
Yeah, I'm going to cut this conversation short then, if that's the case.
But Jerry, when you were a kid, Did you have a love of story and photography?
Not photography. I didn't have an opportunity. Well, that's not true. It depends how little. When I got my first camera when I was 12, 13. So that early. Yes, I did. I really enjoyed photography. Mostly.
Brownie?
No, it wasn't a Brownie. It was a little Instamatic.
Those are
So a
fun.
little more sophisticated.
Yeah.
But yes, I had a extended family that liked to tell stories. My grandmother, my paternal grandmother, because my father's, he's incarceration, right? I didn't see him very often. So she would tell stories about her family and about raising him. And so I kind of was initiated to that kind of thing. And I've been interested in that ever since. It's interesting. My mother's family were immigrants. She was a second generation. They didn't talk about the old country, not around me. They probably talked about it among the aunts,
Mm-hmm.
And this is so. I think that the big shock for anybody who's at a second or third generation American, which is millions of people, is you don't really know what's going on. I mean, anybody who's seen the PBS show about discovering your roots, I believe is the correct title.
Yes.
Like, I didn't know that. How could that be? They didn't talk about. I hear that over and over and over again. That's a great show to inspire why you should do this or how. And digressing a moment, you can get lots of conversation and the video, but you probably only need 10% of it. And that's where people like Greg and Bonnie and myself come in. You need somebody who has editing tools. And I'll tell you why. You may say, oh, it's okay. But your 15-year-old and your 20-year-old are going to, they are very low attention span. They're not going to sit through 16 scenes to wait to see when the cavalry comes, to use an old reference. So that I wanted to say that because that's important so that you don't feel like, well, I can't just get the best pieces. No, you don't. You leave the devices, the recording devices on, and then you edit it later on.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, I was interested in storytelling and hearing about it. And it takes a long time to pry that out of some of the older folks.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So I remember the first time you had set me up with a microphone and I put it on the kitchen table.
With your dad?
My dad, and he was rocking. He was not too comfortable, and my mother as well. And it took time. I think when the smartphones came in, that was the blessing because you could easily, sneakily just kind of turn it on and set it there. Nobody noticed.
Yeah, nobody noticed. Yes. So I think I've told this story before. When I was about in my 20s, I went and helped my Uncle Joe with his farm work in the spring. He was going in for an operation, and Joe liked to talk. Like he would be telling stories, and sometimes he'd be telling stories about World War II. And I'd be face down on the table drooling, and he's still talking. And his audience didn't even have to be conscious. But I finally got him. It was on my list to go and do a bunch of interviews with him and get his stories down. But I did have an occasion one time to turn the video camera on, and I recorded him. But the thing is he went from birth to going to agricultural college, getting married, having kids, entering the war, liberating Holland. Not quite in that order, but in like 7 minutes. Like his whole life was 7 minutes long.
Well, I'm reminded of we're talking kind of like DIY and the most important. You don't have to be a professional interviewer to know two things. The most important questions aren't when and what and who. The most important questions are how and why. If you remember that, let them tell you the when and the who and so forth, and then ask why or how did they do this, and that'll be the most interesting stories.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What are you working on now, Jerry?
Well, I am, we mentioned we talked about our collaboration and how things blew up with COVID. And then you guys had to figure out how to get back over the border because you're in Southern California, a lot of wacky stories there. but I couldn't do in-person interviews. So I learned to do what we're doing now. And I have a setup, an equipment to do that. And the technology has grown a lot. There's 2 or 3 really good platforms. So that I got all this stuff. If I come and I want to use this stuff because I have this stuff, right? But I realized that sometimes that's intimidating to people.
Yeah.
And so and it's expensive for me to travel to do that, right? Because it's, et cetera. I mean, obviously. So if somebody's not sponsoring you, as you guys know, then I found that the technology online is getting good enough that I've done most of my recent interviews online. And there are, and I have to say, there's software that can improve the look of it. Like I had what my latest interview, and was a gentleman in Denver, and he didn't want to have to use Chrome. He was like, he didn't like the privacy issues, right? You know, some people are concerned about certain software of the online that will maybe invade your privacy. So he tried to do it, and it was frustrating. He couldn't do it. So we did it on Zoom, which works, you know, but after I recorded it, he told great stories. He was like, he was wonderful about when he was very agriculturally oriented. He was an agricultural, like an attaché in other countries. And so he had a lot of the organic background. That was his passion. And throughout his career, but he wound up working with New Hope Communication and was a manager of the natural merchandiser, et cetera, for quite a while. But the point is, there's tools now that I could sweeten up his Zoom and make it look better than it was when we recorded it. And so the technology is advanced so that especially if they have a decent mic, because some of them don't, but you can mail them one, or they can, they have it. You can get really good results that way. So I've been trying to be, that allows me to go to places without me having to meet them somewhere.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, you have a worldwide business.
You never have to leave your office.
Yeah.
That's right. Now, Jerry, who do you love to work with? And is it a certain age group? Is it a certain men, women? Who do you love to interview and help them share their stories?
The older, the better, because since I'm specializing in what we were in the natural health industry, they were really outcast. So I love these old timer stories. This is what I actually have kind of come up with 3 categories: comparable to the U.S. invasion of indigenous lands in Canada, et cetera. The pathfinder, that's kind of like the the people who were there the first, and they followed the original Indian trails and so forth. Those pathfinders are some of the most interesting ones, because about 100 years ago, American medicine started changing, and they got real snobby about, say, traditional methodology, and just threw out the whole baby with the bathwater. So they had a lot of the original struggles. And then there's what I call pioneers. They actually follow the scouts, and so that's a lot of the people that we've dealt with. So the older, the better. And those a lot of them aren't with us anymore, like the gentleman you were talking about in Los Angeles. He just made himself, it was a bar, right? As I recall, he made himself his own health food, and he was selling it on local college campuses. This was like the late 70s, as I recall.
Howard?
Right?
Yeah.
So those people have the most interesting stories because they struggle the most. It's really that simple.
Yeah.
Right.
And then people came in and followed in their footsteps, and they have a lot of that as growth stories. But the initiators, the people who are crazy enough to go into a business, which is now one of the largest industries in the United States. You know, it's hundreds of billions of dollars of business because people, you know, are interested in enhancing and prolonging their life without necessarily having chemistry involved from as much as little as possible. So, one doesn't particularly come to mind, but it's that category that I seek out, and often I'm too late.
Yeah.
As you pointed out in your case.
So, Jerry, I have another question for you. Often, you know, people are looking for someone just like you, and I'm curious where you hang out and how people find you.
Well, you know, Greg made a wonderful YouTube channel, and I've been populating it, and we have quite a few people who subscribe to that, surprisingly. So I publicized that when I was doing some collaborative work and so forth, and we had people mention it. So that's the main way they get in touch. Right now, I don't have a working website, but mostly what I've been trying to do is this connections with people in the natural product industry, and that's a hit and miss situation. It involves a little bit of selling, obviously, but usually if somebody's happy with their interview, they'll pass it on and recommend it to others. So
yes, word of mouth is powerful.
Yeah.
And again, Jerry and I have known each other forever, and he always said, you know, video is king, you know, and he knew that intuitively, that video and YouTube was going to be a very powerful tool in the future. And I love that you capture and share those stories for people. And it makes history even more interesting. It's not just the big picture on the news and TV, but it's the real juiciness of the real people who make life better for other people. And you've done some stories of just regular folk, you know, that they share it with their family and friends.
Yes.
And that's, you know, the oral history in a sense. And I wish I did have much more video than I do of my mother. Yeah.
Well, you know, when you mentioned, and I think that's a good thing to talk about to people who have general interest watching this, you got to coax them because they will drag their feet. They feel self-conscious about it, especially, what do you want me to talk about? Me? So that's what you remember. You remember your mother was like, she would avoid you if you pulled that camera out. So here's
she froze up like a deer in the headlights. It just really, anxiety took over for her.
Yes. So here's a suggestion to overcome that for people who are interested in trying that. Not that you want to mislead them, but tell them that you want them to talk about their mother, their father, their grandmother, their grandfather. And frankly, that's the most important thing to talk about, in the sense that they're maybe the last person that knew them personally.
Right.
Then that can slide. You can just slide into, well, how old were you when that happened? And you know, oh, well, now, but it's not a sneaky thing. It's more of a comfort level.
Right. You taught me something else about still pictures. I ended up with, I'm not kidding, after my mom passed, we had 23 boxes of photos. We still have about 4 or 5 to go through.
Not bad.
Almost 15 years ago. And what's interesting is you said to get Ziploc bags and kind of sort through them and put, you know, like with like. Right. That was very, very helpful. And I was only once able to gather all my siblings in one spot at one time. And I did 2 huge tables, and I would take a box and lay them all out.
Right.
And that was so much fun.
Yeah. That would be fun just to record too, by the way.
It was so much fun. And the thing, what we did is we put them in like with like. And then I said, if you want this photo, let me scan it in, and then you take the photo. And so we did it that way. And it was a really helpful tip. And I really appreciated that tip, because it can be intimidating to have a whole box full of photos. And one thing we did do last time I was down there with one of the boxes with my father, if he didn't know who they were, we let it go because there was actually no one to know who this person was.
Yes.
And he might even have the same photo 10 times, and then we could let that photo go too.
Right. Right. Now, you're reminding me though something about, just to elaborate on the bags. The idea was, if as you collect them, you want to go generationally up and generationally down. So like the biggest bag would be Smith family. And then the smallest bag would be Jerry Smith's family and children and grandchildren. So that helps you organize them on the
that was
fly.
really helpful.
Yeah.
But the trick is that a lot of people don't know how to scan, are intimidated by it, or don't want to learn to scan. So what do they do then? You overcome that, and because you're intrepid. But I have a suggestion and a caution. There are services, mail order services, that if you're going to use a mail order service, either through a retailer like Walmart and so forth, I really would be cautious about it, because there are times, I don't know the frequency, but they lose orders, they lose photos, and you can't get them back once it's lost in that maze. And then he has another idea I can see.
Yeah, going back to the phone here, the phone actually is a pretty good camera. And if nothing else, if you take photos of the photos, and then there are some apps that are designed to help optimize that. So there are lots of really good tools.
Good point. And the tricky, the best part of that is just getting it straight. Right.
And getting the lighting right. Because the phone gets in the way of the light.
Yes. And you don't want glare, it's too much light. So you can fuss with it. I do recommend, though, for those, besides a mail order, because what happens is they can get lost. And I had a service I liked and worked well for me, but I didn't realize their reviews had such problematic issues. The point is, you can go to Walgreens, and there are 3,000 of those coast to coast, or something like that, lots of them, and they have a really economical and easy scanning booth, and they do various things, including slides and so forth. And you'll not lose them because they're right there.
You're right there.
The Walmart here, and it's a little town, and it's a small Walmart, but they have a photo center, and they use
good
stuff for you.
Excellent.
And print almost anything too.
Yeah.
Excellent. So
So well, you mentioned, Bonnie asked where we can get a hold of you, and so there's a website here I put in the chat, and I'll it's actually our YouTube channel, and I'll show that here. So this is what we're talking about.
Right.
And we've got a collection of many of these interviews that we've done.
Stephen Hoffman is the most recent one I did. The one who was he was an agricultural expert. He was wonderful.
Yeah. So we can go back and push the little arrow and go look at more. There we go.
And then Mark Blumenthal, that's the bearded gentleman. His story was great. As what happened to all those hippies? What did they do? Well, he went into herbs.
Yeah. The herbs are perfect. There's Michael. That was the last one we did on the way home.
He was adorable.
Yeah.
He said he'd trained 10,000 herbalists around the world at that time, and that was 5 years ago.
You know what? And just a little tidbit. His distinction was he was the first to popularize the common Indian herb echinacea.
That's right.
Yeah. I just realized going through this that there are at least 4 people we interviewed who are no longer with us.
Wow.
Yeah. So and some of those were surprising.
Well, that's sad, but glad we have a story for them.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Jerry, it's just been a pleasure to reconnect, and move forth. Please reach out to us if you'd like to meet Jerry in person. We can make that connection for you. Please go check out you'll drop it in the chat, right? The Natural Products, Natural Health Movement link, so people can.
I did. I put it.
You dropped that in the chat.
And I'll go do it again later.
Just take a moment and think of who would you like to, get their story. And if you need help, reach out. And it's something you'll be glad you did. And don't wait, right, Jerry?
You just read my mind.
Yeah, don't wait. And if you go to the tellyourstory.productions, we put in quite a few broadcasts and tips about how to capture these stories. So
Right.
Mhm.
so we haven't said anything really new today. We're just reiterating. So
Well, it's worth repeating
it's
because
worth repeating.
it's worth
Yeah.
repeating as even we are heading towards that 100 mark. We'll all get there. Maybe. I know my dad just mentioned it the other day. He said he's 94. He says, I guess I'll stick around another 6 or 8 years to annoy you children.
Out of
It's important
spite.
to have goals.
Yeah.
Important to have
Out of
goals.
spite. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you for being on today. And we're going to have to do this again just to keep reminding people to get those stories.
Get those stories. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And go check out some of those videos that we did.
Yes.
Some of those are really, really insightful.
Inspirational and insightful.
Inspirational. And some of those people, you may not know the work that they were doing at the time, but you see the results. For example, you just did an extensive biography of somebody who sold her store to Whole Foods, and Whole Foods is in some ways modeled after her store. So, and almost everybody knows Whole Foods.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
True.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, until the next time.
Till the next time, Jerry.
Bye-bye.